Okay. Is this thing on? Am I working? Is it connecting with you? Okay, 10 seconds in. Well, we're going to be talking about creating an academic uh, Microsoft Word template. And we're going to be doing that using uh, Turabian's Manual for Writers. This is a student version of the Chicago Manual of Style. It's a smaller, an abridged edition. The Chicago one is much larger than this. The part where students don't tend to look is at the back of the book. It's called the appendix. And the appendix is something that we need to pay attention to in terms of the general format of the book. We have to think about the paper's format in terms of its margins, in terms of its typeface, like what type of font you're using, the spacing, the indentation of the sentences between paragraphs, because it's different between a body paragraph and bibliographical paragraph. The indentation as well is different, and the page numbers, and also how to use titles, where to use them. We have to also consider the front matter, which is like your submission page, your title page, your table of content. Uh, Also the back matter, which is like your bibliography, your appendix, or graphs or tables that you're submitting, depending on what type of paper you're doing, and also the type of text that we're using within the body itself. And also in the appendix of Turabian, it talks about how to prepare your files to submit to your teachers, including submitting the files electronically. I think a lot of students are having a hard time uh, submitting these files electronically because they're not thinking about the name of the file when they are submitting it to the teacher. And when they are revising it and giving it back, they're tending to copy over the original version, and uh, destroying work that they have already previously done that could have been useful. So let's get into that. First of all, we're looking at the page format in Turabian, and one of the things that we're going to have to consider here are the margins. Now, the margins in Turabian are required to have at least 1 inch. 1 inch on regular essay formats in all three sides or all four sides of the paper. Now, if it's a dissertation or a thesis, you might have a different margins to have to consider. For those, you might have to have 1.5 inch margins. So let's take a look at our document that we've pulled up. And what we have is just the academic the paper that we're going to be using. And we notice that here are the margins. And how do we change the margins? We have to go into layout. So the margins are right here. And you could see that there's multiple choices. In inches, which is American measurement, it's about 2.54 for all four sides. So that's the one we're going to select, which is the normal version. Now we have to consider font, the type of font that we're using. Now in Turabian, they're saying that we need Times New Roman, Courier, or Helvetia. And if we have something different, we have to check here. Well, here I've already set it up. It's on Times New Roman here, but perhaps I didn't do it all the way through. So I can do a Control A and select all the text in my document and make sure that all of those are Times New Roman, which is right here. Okay, so that means all my font are that way. The other thing we have to consider is how much the size of our font. We could go and select 12-point font, which is what Turabian is suggesting here. It's probably preferable to use 12-point font in the body of the text. So that's why we're selecting 12-point font here. We could exactly notice there is a shortcut when we highlighted that. We could use Control Shift P, and that would allow us to change the font. Okay. Another thing that we have to consider in Turabian is, okay, we did the font size and page break. Now, when you originally get your paper, it may be blank, and they may not have these page breaks. And I'll show you what they look like. This is the character reveal, and it says page break. I can remove that page break by just deleting it like that. And if I wanted to add that, I would go Control, Enter, and that gives me my page break in here. So I've actually created in my template two page breaks. One will be for the title page. One will be for the body of the actual text. And the third is for the bibliography, because each one has a different formatting to it. Okay, so our title page, we have to consider something. Usually there's some confusion here about these two types of things, which is a title page and a submission page. I've seen students on ordinary essays submitting a submission page, which is not a normal thing that you want to do. So what is a title page versus a submission page? Well, first of all, title pages, normally you have your title. It starts off at the title of the paper itself. It starts off at 1/3 of the way from the top of the paper. And then you might have a subtitle after a line. You would put in your name after several lines after that, the student's name, your student number, and the course title, the department, and also the number of the course itself. And lastly, the date of submission. For the submission page, it's a little bit different in that this is for theses and dissertations only. And what you would find is that it has everything that the title page includes, except there is also this small part about the paper being submitted for partial fulfillment of requirements such as a master's degree or a PhD. The space there's also usually a space at the bottom for your committee signatures, indicating who is there and maybe the approval of acceptance of your dissertation or thesis once you've defended it. So you can see there's a difference there. This line does not appear in your title page on a regular essay or assignment. Okay. And what would that be looking like? Well, let's take a look at a title page. Here is a title page in Word, and you can see that it has a title starting off at the beginning, and it has a few lines, got student's name, the student number, the course, and the date. However, for a submission paper, it's a little different. This is a submission page. uh, University of Chicago, the school, the title of uh, the paper. Then you have submitted to for candidacy of the doctorate program, and also the department, the person's name, maybe not a student number because this is getting ready for publication in a book. Um, the place of publication and also the date in which it's being submitted or published. So next, we have to think about our headers, and the header is the space up at the top here of our uh, paper, and in that paper, normally this would contain your page numbers, your maybe identifiers of who did the work for this paper. Um, but when we go to do the pageation, we want all the pages in our paper to be numbered, but we don't want the first page to be numbered. So we would want in the header and footer. Let's take and stretch this out a bit. Okay, you can see it better. Okay, so once we clicked into the header, so notice I was here, and when I click on it, it enters automatically. This is one way of doing it, or you can hit Control V, H, and that brings you up to get into the header. We want this to have a different first page. Now, with this off, notice I have identifier here and a 0 with a page number on it. However, I don't want that. We don't want any numbers on the front page. We hit this key. Uh, we check it off. It says different first page, which makes it disappear. When we go to actually do the numeration, we should click into the next page, the body page, and then start our numbers here. Now, how did we get that number in here? Well, in that header, when it pops up, that header section, we have the page number, and we can say where you want it. And according to Arabian, it doesn't really matter where you put it. I prefer it over on the right-hand side. It's much easier to see. You could have put it at the bottom. Doesn't matter as long as you have a number on your page, so it doesn't get lost or out of order. It's good for your numbering. However, how is it that this page starts off with number 1 and the title page started off with 0? Well, with that number highlighted, we can go in and format our page numbers. And notice we started at 0. If we had started at 1, that would have numbered title page number 1. If we start at 0, that means page 2 is actually page 1. And so that's how we ended up with different page numbers, and that will continue throughout. You can see it's on bibliography as well. Now, one of the things I've also included here is something called an identifier. An identifier, in this case, is something that lets other people know whose work this is, so the professor doesn't uh, uh, send it to the wrong people or get the pages mixed up if he's got a hard copy and it gets scattered everywhere accidentally. So that way you're able to know what student it is and the page number, and everything stays in order, and that's wonderful. So we need to look at what the body, something about the body. Okay, another thing. How did I get to be able to view these characters and see what's happening here? Like, here's a paragraph return, here's page break, and you can see that there's a space here near the header, and there's a number of spaces in between. How did I do that? Well, that is the trick of this key called Control, Shift, and asterisk. So you hold all three of these keys down, you can shift between viewing and unviewing of characters. That's kind of handy to know what's going on, particularly if you're having to deal with tables um, and other difficult challenges like knowing whether there's a page break there or it's not a tab key, maybe it's not indented properly. Now this is actually quite good because now we can actually see what's going on with these characters. Because when we do the paragraph formatting and we start creating a single versus double line spacing, you can see the difference without having to actually see uh, much else. So for example, if I go like this, you can see that there is actually double lines here. If I didn't have the character view on, then you wouldn't be able to see anything there. It'd just be blank space. So with it on, I can see it's double spaced. Now, if I have to create a block quote, then I can hit Control 1 and everything becomes single line. If I need to do that for a footnote, because footnotes are not double spaced, or bibliography, they're also having to be single spaced, then we could hit Control 1. But in this case, for our body, we have to have double spaced, so our double spacing is Control 2. So that's automatically how we could do that. We could also insert a footnote. Now notice I've already inserted a footnote here. And if I want to insert another footnote there just to show you, I get Alt I, and that gets all the characters moving, and then N, and then I get the EndNote pop-up menu. And here I can choose between footnotes and endnotes. Perhaps professors might prefer one or the other. I prefer footnotes because I can read it right away instead of having to look for the comments. And you can also format them as well. And then you just insert it. And once you've inserted it, it will automatically pop down to here. Now I've seen students who've typed that number in and then inserted it at the bottom, and that I can imagine how much time they're actually wasting trying to do that. Here it already is doing it for you. Now there's something else about these footnotes and endnotes and these also these paragraph lines that you might not quite notice, but here is the margin. Here is where the start of my sentence is. And if I were to continue typing, well, it's going to take too much time to do it this way. If I continue to typing all the way across, I would end up with the first line of my paragraph being indented. Oh my goodness. Okay, I guess that's all the spaces do that. Okay. Oh well. Anyway, the first line is indented. You can actually remove that indentation by going up to paragraph, and it says here under this pop-up menu special, and it says first line. I can remove it and turn it to none, and you can see in the preview that the lines all line up to the margin. But in our body, when we're using our paragraphs, we want to have that first line indentation there. So we go to special and select first line indent. Okay, so that means for every first line of our paragraph will be indented. It's very clear, it's easier to read. And every time that we hit the return key, we end up being able to start with a new indentation. We don't have to add new tabs to that. This is quite different for bibliographies. Bibliographies have what's called a hanging indentation. That means only the first line is flush to the margin, and the other lines are indented inward. We accomplish that by selecting hanging in this special option. And they are, of course, single-spaced bibliographical elements. First, the footnotes are indented first. The bibliographical elements are hanging indentation. So there is a distinction between these two, amongst other things. So that's where we have the bibliographical line indentation for these particular elements. You could also do bibliographical hanging pages by using Control T. What you don't want to do is use a spacebar. For various reasons, it's just a very time-consuming thing to be doing. Every time that you type in a line, whether it's in the bibliography especially, and there's a formatting change, or there's an error, or a misspelling, or something that has to be added or subtracted, whatever, it will misalign your bibliographical indentation. So that's why it's very important that you use this paragraph indent that's provided by Word. So one of the things that we need to also make sure of when we're doing our template is making sure that it has down here in the options, right here, there is, when you go into the options and press save, make sure that the autosave is on so that you're keeping your work saved every 10 minutes or so you're not having to reperform or redo the work that you've already done, because if you do that, then it will always be in a recovery document, and if the power goes out or something goes wrong with your computer, something there will be saved, and you will save yourself countless amount of time and energy. Also, naming your file. Well, first of all, for our template document, we'd have to go in and we would select Save As. And we would want to make sure that we know what our template document was. We would say Academic Writing Template. But instead of choosing the normal Word document, we're choosing this thing called Word Template, which is the actual template that when you select it, it's kind of like starting with a blank document. It'll say document 1, but it'll already have all the formatting there for you. So this is what we're selecting. We're going to save that. Now, when we want to use this again, we are going to go in, and we want to start anew. We go to the templates. Okay, so there's templates, more templates, and we will look in the personal. It's the one that you made up yourself. And as you can see, here are one of the academic writing template, and ta-da, it's all there. Right at the top it says document 2. So when you go to save it, you'll be saving it as a new name. You're not going to rewrite over top of the old file. And all the things that you've done to format your text are ready and waiting for you to start writing. You don't have to worry about them again. Now, when you actually go to name your files, you need to name them responsibly. So to avoid confusion, to avoid antagonizing or irritating your professor. So what you need to think about is, well, your personal organization. If you're going to name files, but you keep using the same name, like assignment or assignment 1, but you're not identifying which assignment 1, if you have multiple classes and you end up mixing up all these classes, or you're having to search for a particular document or paper that you did previously so that you can remember what you studied, it's not going to work out very well for you because you have to spend countless hours trying to find your document again. And for the professor, you need to consider him as well. When you're communicating with other readers, you need to identify very clearly what is this document that they are receiving and what is it, where do they file it? Do they file it under one of their other 6 courses, or is it something personal that they're needing to edit? You have to identify very clearly through the actual labeling of that document. Here's an example of some very poorly labeled documents. When given the assignment, these students decided that, oh, this is a good title. Uh, it has got the year. We know when it is. We know what course it's for, and perhaps it's assignment number 1, but we have no idea which student wrote this. And the professor, if it's not identified inside the paper itself, then it's the professor is lost as to what to do with it. And if he's got multiple students, he's not going to be able to know which one didn't do this assignment or doesn't have it marked. And it's very frustrating to have to work through. Academic writing 1, okay, what year is it? When was it? Which class is it for? Is it for last year's class, this year's class? I don't know. And I don't know how the student would know academic writing if there's multiple courses on academic writing. Assignment. What course? What assignment? What student? Professor doesn't know. It's so. Do you see? There's a problem here. When you're labeling your actual file, you need to be very specific. It also helps with your organization as well, so that when you end up with something like YA 1, YA 2, YA 3, what course is this for? What year did you write this? Don't know. Here's a properly labeled group of files. We have the year, we have the subject, we have the student number, so you know who wrote it. We have the assignment, so we know which one it is. So automatically, it's very simple, easy, not only for the student who could line up all his work and see what's missing, but also for the professor to know that, to be able to know which ones he's done, to know which student it is, what course it is, so he can put it in the right file automatically when he's downloading it to the email. So how would you label your document file? 1, year is a good idea. Kind of organize things from year to year so you know when you wrote it. Also, the semester you wrote it. That's important. It's important for the professor because maybe he's got the same assignment he's given out multiple times throughout the year, different semesters. He needs to be able to organize it and put it in the right folder. The course name, very important. The student number, your student number, not the one that's on the screen here, but the one that you have that's been given to you by the school. And the assignment number, so they know which one it is that they're looking at, so they know how they're going to grade it, which one to mark it, how to organize it. Could be a writing task, whichever it is. If it's got more than 10 writing tasks, it's a good idea to put a 0 in front of the number. So in this way, all these items can be put together and be able to organize your file, and it helps you organize it. It helps the professor also organizing it. So here's an example of how the file would appear if it were for this particular course. It's got the year, 2020. Just put it in 20. Semester 1, academic writing, research methodology. We have the student number, and we have the assignment number. Bam. Very clear. If it's in the file folder, it'll end up with these DOC or DOCX file names at the end of it. But that's only for Word. It tells you what type of file it is. Some student decided that DOC needed to be part of the file name, so we ended up with documents saying doc.doc, which okay, that's not what needed to happen there. Anyway, So if you were to write a file, writing it for writing task one, what would it look like? Well, we'd have to have the year. We'd have to have the semester, the course name, the student number, and the task that's being written there. So that's what it would probably look like. What if in the communication you're having with a professor that the assignment was being reviewed and you got it handed back? What would the file name be then? Well, then the professor or the reviewer should change the file name so that it should have it's been reviewed, and maybe the initials of the person who reviewed it. In this case, it's my initials. What if you needed to revise it? Professor hands you back your draft, your work, and says, this needs to be changed. It's plagiarized. It's got something wrong with it. Well, then, add in revision. In this case, if you handed in the file name was A1, now you've made some changes, indicate you did. Revision 1, you've changed something. And if you have to keep changing something, change it to revision 2, revision 3, however long it takes to get it right. What if, okay. So that is what I have to say about labeling and formatting your template. If you do all these things, then you could save yourself lots of time, and you'll be very professional, and you won't have to worry about these errors again and again and again. You don't have to keep setting them all up. Once you've done that, then you're good to go. And let's be academic.